attacks. I'm very angry at her because of what she's done to the country. I'm very angry at her that she'd weaponized the justice system against me and other people. Very angry at her. I think I'm entitled to personal attacks. I don't have a lot of respect for her. I don't have a lot of respect for her intelligence, and I think she'll be a terrible president. And I think it's very important that we win. And whether the personal attacks are good, bad, I mean, she certainly attacks me personally. She actually called me weird. He's weird. It was just a soundbite. And she called J.D. and I weird. He's not weird. He was a great student at Yale. He went to Ohio State, graduated in 2 years, at the top of his class, and all of these different things. And we have this guy that's running a very failed state, who's had a terrible career. I mean, you have him saying they're weird. No, he's a weird guy. And she's weird in her policy. So I don't think so. I don't think people know who she is yet. When people, because really people didn't know. You can ask the man on the street. I saw it on one of the shows today. They asked the man on the street, what's the last name of Kamala? Nobody knew. It's Harris. Nobody knew the last name. I don't even use it because nobody knows who I'm talking about. People don't know who she is. And when they find out, I think you're going to see something.
Oh, man, Trump is, I don't care, he could get mad all he wants, but Trump is weird. Okay, that man is weird. I think Trump is hilarious because he's like in a way, he's sort of a caricature of what a rich guy is. I think that's one of the things that sort of helps him. It certainly helped him in the world of pro wrestling back when he was working with the WWE. It helped him on The Apprentice. It helps him it helped him very much in the entertainment world that Trump, I've always said he's the clown prince of capitalism. And that's sort of what he is. He is kind of weird. And, you know, before I get into the story, I just want to say, as a leftist, this is why I don't support billionaires existing. I don't. This is why I don't support billionaires existing. Come on. Do I have to applaud myself? Come on. Billionaires shouldn't exist, everybody. And a big part of the reason is that, like, you have no way of dealing with people who are not either completely subordinate to you or completely terrified of you if you're a billionaire. These people have no understanding of what real life is. They have no ability to process real thoughts, real feelings, completely decoupled from being a billionaire, which means they're inherently out of touch. Inherently. So, you know, but that's neither here nor there. Billionaires shouldn't exist, says me, okay? An actual leftist. But presidential candidate Donald Trump released his 20 core promises to make America great again on Monday afternoon, which includes the promise to keep the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. Oh, we're going to get into that one. So we need to run through these really quick. He wants to seal the border and stop the migrant invasion. That's the winning line for Trump. I'm glad he put that at number one. If, you know, as a good for him, you know, he should have put that number one. I'm not going to vote for him, but it is a winning line for him. It is the best strategic thing for him to emphasize because the Biden administration has been god-awful on the border, on mass immigration. I've done a story here where the Biden administration literally flew hundreds of thousands of migrants into the country. Literally flew them in. Obviously, the corporate media, you know, that often works for the corporate Democratic Party does not talk about this. I had to go to the international news and different foreign sources to learn about this, but that's pretty bad. Also, Kamala Harris is sort of flip-flopping on her role. The Biden administration told the entirety of the media that Kamala was the border czar. Oh, Kamala's the border czar. Oh, she's the border czar. You know, they went on and on. They went on and on for months about how she was the border czar.
Quote, border czar. Vice President Harris was not a border czar.
Meantime, Vice President and border czar Kamala Harris facing some backlash.
What he said about Harris and immigration was not true. She was never appointed border czar.
And this will be her first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border region since she was appointed as the border czar by President Biden.
People gonna have to counter the misinformation. You already hear folks talking about the border czar. She wasn't the border czar.
President Biden tapped Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, to be the border czar.
Now, she wasn't the border czar. That's what Republicans labeled her.
They were very critical of Kamala Harris, especially in her role as border czar.
So before Joe Biden dropped out of the race, she was the border czar. And so you can hear, you know, the mainstream media saying, "Oh, she's the border czar." As soon as he left the race, she was never the border czar. So he's hitting her on something that I think is valid, that they need to address. And I've said this for a long time. They need to address mass immigration. And Kamala Harris, for her own account, has not, a lot of statements she made have not been great on this.
It is wrong to somehow suggest that an undocumented immigrant is a criminal. Being an undocumented immigrant is not a crime. I know what a crime looks like. An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal. 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 An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal.
Now, I can't get with that, okay? But it just goes to show you how much the messaging of Democrats has changed, because that was definitely not Bill Clinton's messaging or Barack Obama's. When Obama was running, if you read Obama's book and he talks about the effects of illegal immigration, you read what people like A. Philip Randolph said about mass immigration. Cesar Chavez, you know, straight called them illegals and all kinds of racial slurs. That's the greatest Hispanic labor leader in this country's history. But at some point, I think the corporate wing of the Democratic Party found out that they could, or at least believed that they could pander to the Hispanic community by downplaying the effect of illegal immigration on communities, especially the black community. And they got a lot of black people, a lot of black helpers to go along with that. I think definitely the whole illegal immigration thing is Kamala Harris's biggest Achilles heel. The Biden administration and its border czar, which they said she was for years until she decided to run for president, have to deal with how 20 million people just somehow ended up in the country the last 3 years. They're going to have to answer that. So seal the border and stop the migrant invasion. That should be number one of his core promises. Also, he says we have to carry out the largest deportation operation in American history. I agree with that. I also agree with that. Again, little known fact that the corporate media doesn't tell you about. Barack Obama, and you guys know I've been very critical of Barack Obama. One of the few things Barack Obama did that I 100% agree with, he deported more people every year he was president than Donald Trump did any year he was president. Barack Obama deported more people than every president in the 20th century combined. Okay? Now, again, he wrote about it in his book. He talked about it on the campaign trail. I played the clip here before of Barack Obama talking about illegal immigration. That's one of the best things he ever did for black people in this country. Might be the single best thing he ever did for black Americans in this country. I don't think he did anything else that really benefited us, but that certainly did. If you look at the history of illegal immigration and how it affects black communities. Number 3 on Trump's list is end inflation and make America affordable again. Unless he's going to address his friends in corporate America who are purposely price gouging the public, and again, that's a story I've done on here. There's been studies that shown 60% of inflation is due to corporate greed. Donald Trump is not talking about that whatsoever. And he's also not talking about the war in Ukraine and how Ukraine, since the Ukrainian conflict, the price of everything has gone up. I told you guys a million times here on this show about how I used to buy a lot of stuff cheaper at the grocery store before 2022. As soon as Russia invaded Ukraine, after being obviously provoked by the United States and NAFTA for 30 years, I mean NATO. Did I say NAFTA or NATO? They were provoked by the United States and NATO to do so. Prices, obviously, of gas exploded. Grocery costs, everything's exploded since 2022. And a big part of that, I don't know exactly how Donald Trump would address that, considering that his biggest accomplishment when he was president was tax cuts to the very people who are responsible for most of this inflation. He wants to make America the dominant energy producer in the world by far. Now that one probably will happen, in the sense that they basically want to gut all the limitations that the EPA has set on oil production. They basically want to gut all the oil production, the limits on oil production. Now, Biden actually his administration okayed more drilling in the Arctic Circle and in the Gulf than Trump did when he was in office. So to me, it really doesn't matter whether you vote Democrats or Republicans. They're going to continue to pump fossil fuels out of the ground and destroy much of the environment to do so. Trump says he wants to stop outsourcing and turn the United States into a manufacturing superpower. Now, he had 4 years to do that. He did not do that when he was in office the first time. I will say that's one of the more consistent things we've heard from Trump since he was a candidate, his opposition to NATO and TPP, these types of trade deals that allowed jobs to be sent out of the country. Also, I think that his vice president, J.D. Vance, is very much an economic populist who believes in protectionist policies. So do I. So did just about everybody on the left, at least in the American left, for much of the 20th century, until the Democrats erased everybody's brain in the last 20 years or so. And thanks to the Clintons now, where they support trade deals and just tell people to learn how to code. But these tax cuts for the wealthy and outsourcing with these trade deals has killed America's working class. It really has. For the last 40 years, we have lost millions upon millions of jobs. Hopefully, if Trump does indeed get elected, J.D. Vance will convince him to take a more populist, protectionist approach to the economy. I would support that, even though I do not support him. He's saying he wants large tax cuts for workers and no tax on tips. That's another one of his promises that he's made. Now Kamala's actually adopted that too. Kamala Harris has adopted that as well. Large tax cuts for no tax on tips, should I say? She just was out there talking about this on the campaign trail. Next week is the DNC, and she finally released some policies instead of just vibes and stuff, and Megan Thee Stallion twerks. So hopefully we'll be able to get into that next week as we cover the DNC. Number 7 is defend our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and our fundamental freedoms, including freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to keep and bear arms. It's unfortunate that we have to essentially say that, but we do live in the era of censorship. People are being silenced for telling the truth. And it's not just one party or the other. Both parties were behind the long detention of Julian Assange, who was just released, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, from detention. He was incarcerated for years solely for telling the truth about war crimes that America had committed. Both Democrats and Republicans went after him. And we see it every day on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, people being censored. You know, I was censored a lot during the pandemic. A lot of the propaganda that was coming from Big Pharma-owned media was being censored, and a lot of it was true. Mark Zuckerberg himself has admitted, who is the head of Facebook, the CEO of Facebook, admitted that a lot of the things that they censored were true. They first censored that if you got the vaccine, you wouldn't catch COVID. People who said anything opposite of that would be censored or have their platform taken away. We now know that most of the people who got the vaccine caught COVID as well. They also censored people who said that the virus likely originated from a lab in China, when now the Biden administration themselves have said that it's most likely emanated from a lab in China. So in both cases, you're dealing with a lot of censorship. Hopefully he is serious about that. Now, here's the thing I don't really trust about the Republicans. The Republicans are the ones who spent my entire childhood censoring rappers and rock and roll stars and trying to throw Hugh Hefner in jail and Larry Flint in jail over putting dirty pictures in magazines and stuff. Are the Republicans really a free speech party? I don't think so. They have spent the last 10 months or so, I guess it's 10 months or so, censoring people who criticize Israel for the genocide they're perpetuating against the Palestinians. Demanding people be censored. So I'm not 100% sure that Trump is serious, or at least the Republican Party in general is serious about defending our Bill of Rights and our fundamental freedom. They just want people to have guns. That's about the only thing they haven't wavered from. Number 80 wants to prevent World War III, restore peace in Europe and the Middle East, and build a great Iron Dome missile defense shield over the entire country, all made in America. This is complete nonsense. He's not going to do any of this probably. Now, do I think he's less war hungry than what Biden and those people and the sort of neocon wing of the Democratic Party thus far has been? Sure. Trump's the only president in my lifetime who didn't start a new war of some sort. But, as we know, Donald Trump will surround himself with people who are neocons, who are warmongers, and so even if he himself does not start a new war, he will go along with a lot of nonsense from the people in his cabinet. We saw that during his presidency when he tried to overthrow Venezuela's government and whatnot. So I'm not sure that he can prevent World War III. I will say that he does not have this sheer amount of disdain for Vladimir Putin that the liberals do, because the liberals think Vladimir Putin cost Hillary Clinton an election, and so they're being petty and everything is anti-Russia. Trump is a businessman. You know, if it's not good business to screw with Putin, he won't do it. But he is more antagonistic towards China. So China, you don't want to mess with China either. And he did assassinate one of Iran's most important generals. You don't want to mess with Iran either. So I call BS on this one 100%. Number 9 is in the weaponization of the government against the American people. He basically means that he wants to absolve himself of all of his criminal charges. He basically wants to make sure his friends and family, his friends and his family aren't charged with any more crimes. He certainly does not mean that. He wants to essentially allow the police to be able to kill people with impunity. He said that. That's not me saying that. There is no more weaponization of the government against the American people than mass incarceration and police brutality. And again, Trump has always shown support for police in those types of situations. So the Democrats, now obviously Joe Biden wrote the Clinton crime bill, and Kamala Harris also has spent her entire life weaponizing the legal system against poor and suffering people, and often innocent people. If you listen to the stories of Kevin Cooper and Jamal Truelove and people like that. So again, we just have a situation where both parties have no problem using the government to destroy the poor and working classes' lives. Number 10, stop the migrant crime epidemic, demolish the foreign drug cartels, crush gang violence, and lock up violent offenders. I think he'll probably do more to stop that than the Democrats in this particular case, just because, as I said in the last entry, Trump is much more of a overt law and order type person. The Democrats like Biden and Kamala Harris and these people, they will do law and order type stuff and then pretend they're not doing it and have y'all defending it as they're destroying our communities. Trump is right up front with, again, wanting to give police sort of the right to just shoot people if they or just kill people if they want. So again, you don't really win either way. Now, there might be sometimes, though, like in the case of some of these foreign gangs, where Trump's lock them up, shoot them up, bang, bang type of logic might benefit us, because some of these gangs like MS-13, these people are serious. And some of these people coming from Venezuela, Caracas was the murder capital of the world for a long time. And I always have to remind people, violent crime in this country has plummeted over the last 30 years, but violent crime in Latin America has exploded. Okay? Places like Caracas, Haiti, Nicaragua, Guatemala, these countries have seen historic crime waves over the last decade or so. I think it's El Salvador that put a guy in power who sort of destroyed, who has fought back against the gang violence, but he seems to be somewhat of a fascist himself, so it's only a matter of time before that blows up. But I definitely think we have to be careful about these foreign cartels. You know, because these people are way more ruthless than even the people we have in this country. He says number 11 is he wants to rebuild our cities, including Washington, D.C., and make them safe, clean, and beautiful again. Yeah, that's nonsense. That's just not going to happen. He's not going to put in the work to the infrastructure, especially the democratic cities, that will make that a reality. I just don't see it. Strengthen and modernize our military, making it without question the strongest and most powerful in the world. This is just ridiculous. America spends more on our military than the next 9 countries combined. There is no like weakness in our military, at least not in funding. Like, everything we have goes into our military. Stuff we should be doing for healthcare, which we're going to get into in the next segment, goes to the military. Number 13 is keep the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. That's not happening. That ship has sailed. BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. There are now 159 countries that are talking with BRICS. Pretty much every country outside of our sphere of influence and the sort of Western European elite countries are now dealing with Russia and China, and they are desperately, furiously coming up with another reserve currency to replace the US dollar. The dollar's days of being dominant is over. If you think inflation is bad now, just wait a few years when the US dollar is no longer the reserve currency, and then you really see something. Number 14, fight for and protect Social Security and Medicare with no cuts, including no changes to the retirement age. That's not going to happen. The Republicans have been trying to do that, cut Social Security since Reagan, I think. Reagan or Bush in the 80s and 90s. I just don't see that happening. Number 15, cancel the electric vehicle mandate and cut costly and burdensome regulations. That will happen because, as I said earlier, Trump is going to ramp up oil production and take the shackles, any shackles that there may have been off of oil companies and these type of polluting energy companies. The EPA will probably be gutted very much under a Trump administration, a second Trump administration. Number 16 is cut federal funding for any school pushing critical race theory, radical gender ideology, or other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content on our children. Now, we talked about this on the show before. I've never been a fan of using our struggle as Black Americans to prop up the radical gender ideology and the looga booga tooga stuff for exactly this reason. Our history gets caught up, gets wrapped up with all these other agendas that have nothing to do with 400 years of warfare against our community. But now it's just one big agenda seen as a woke agenda, when our struggle is not like the gay struggle or the white women's struggle or the feminist struggle. None of that. Our struggle is unique as the people who built this country with chattel slavery. But now, again, all these things, these agendas have been wrapped up in a blanket of woke. I hate using that term, but it is, that's what people know it as. And so now the Republicans in general are going to use that as an excuse to not tell the history of this country. And so that I can definitely see happening. Number 17 is one I agree with 1,000%. Keep men out of women's sports. Keep men out of women's bathrooms. Keep men out of women's sports. Keep drag queens away from children. I don't support any of that. Again, so much of the liberal agenda has colonized the civil rights agenda. So now Black people feel obligated to support this stuff that, you know, doggone well, historically, we never supported. But because our friends tell us that we need to support this, we have to support this. There is no reason for anybody with a Y chromosome to be in women's sports or women's bathrooms. It is what it is. Okay, we all have mothers, sisters, daughters, girlfriends, wives, cousins, whatever, that we care about, and they deserve to have spaces that don't involve men, whether they're biological or genetic men in those spaces. I agree with them 100%. Number 18, deport pro-Hamas radicals and make our college campuses safe and patriotic again. This is Trump the Zionist right here. This is Trump the Zionist doing what he does, which is sucking up to Israel as they commit a genocide against the Palestinian people. Who are pro-Hamas? Now, how many pro-Hamas people are there? Very few. Most people just don't want to see the Palestinians be ethnically cleansed. And so this is a part of an agenda that Trump, Biden, Harris, RFK Jr., all these, everybody, just about everybody running for president except for Jill Stein and brother Cornel West are pushing to purposely conflate criticizing the crimes that Israel is committing with criticizing all Jews or hating all Jews. You do not have to hate all Jews or be an anti-Semite or be pro-Hamas to understand that you don't support genocide and colonialism. And so this is 100% expected from Donald Trump. He goes where the money is, and the Zionists, they have the money. I'm sure they'll say that's anti-Semitic, but hey, I don't care. Okay. Number 19, secure our elections, including same-day voting, voter identification, paper ballots, and proof of citizenship. Other countries do this. Like, there's a lot of talk about voter IDs in this country. Did you know much of Latin America requires voter IDs? And they do same-day voting. They use their thumbprint. Their elections in places like Brazil and even Venezuela, who the U.S. keeps trying to overthrow their democracy, use ID, use thumbprint, they don't use electric ballots that are hooked up to the internet. There is a paper trail for their elections. Their elections are safer than ours. Our elections are a lot more compromised than many of the countries that we claim are so undemocratic. And so I think that we definitely need to tighten up our elections. But again, I think Donald Trump is the wrong messenger for this, because Donald Trump just views any election that he loses as a fake election. He's like the opposition in Venezuela. Number 20, unite our country by bringing it to new and record levels of success. That's just more Trump nonsense, just more of the bluster. Overall, I think some of these things will be doable for Donald Trump. Some of them won't be doable. Some of them, I think, are just nonsense. But the one I know for a fact is done is the U.S. dollar being the world reserve currency. A recent analysis from the Atlantic Council found that the share of the United States dollar in global reserves has fallen from 72% in 2002 to just 58% today, representing a loss of 14% over the last 22 years. Yeah, the dollar is done. All right, folks, when we come back, our athletes from the Olympics have come back with tales of healthcare, actual healthcare that won't bankrupt them and destroy their lives. We'll be right back after these.